1st. We are in the Minnesota Senate Education Finance Committee, and I am now calling it to order. We have an informational hearing to begin with on the Department of Children, Youth, and Family, their bill provisions, and then we will hear SF 2255, that's the Governor's Education Approval. So, as we let Ms. Morse get organized, and then when you're ready, if you just want to introduce yourself for the record, and you can begin your presentation. It looks like in your packets you'll find the A2 amendment. We will not be adopting the amendment onto SF 2250 to ensure that there's no overlap with the HHS budget. So, Ms. Morse, if you are ready, and you have slides, I believe? No slides. Okay, just the PowerPoint? Nope, not even that.
Nope,
okay.
Very brief.
All right, you may begin when you're ready.
Madam Chair, members, my name is Shana Morse. I'm the Legislative Director for Early Childhood Programs at the Department of Children, Youth, and Families, and here to just talk through the portions of the A2 amendment that are in front of you. So this includes all of the items from the DCYF budget bill, Senate File 2705, that fall within this committee's jurisdiction. All of the appropriations that are in this amendment are included in DCYF's base budget. There were no recommendations in the governor's budget for DCYF that impacted these programs specifically in the committee's jurisdiction. But in these base budget appropriations, there's a couple of programs that you will see that are at the Department of Children, Youth, and Families that will be appropriated to the department but transferred to MDE for distribution to schools. Those include school readiness aid, ECFE and home visiting aid, and health and developmental screening aid. The base budget language also includes administrative funding for the voluntary pre-kindergarten program, which is separately tracked from the funding that goes to schools. The funding that goes to schools for the program is actually in the MDE budget bill because it's the funding is akin to sort of the rest of the K-12 system in terms of how it flows out and is calculated. And then finally, in the A2 amendment, there are some portions that are no cost that are included in the governor's budget recommendations but are fiscal in nature. That includes transferring the early childhood literacy grants, or known as Reading Corps, back to the Department of Education, making it clear that when excesses and deficiencies and payment schedules apply to the programs that were recodified under our new chapter of law, and then clarifying certain transfer authorities that allow for flexibility to ensure the seamless operations of the department. Noting here that those sections with some transfer authority do require the approval of MMB and would be reported to the chairs with jurisdiction over the programs quarterly. And that concludes the content of the amendment.
Members, any questions or comments? Well, seeing none, thank you for coming in for these 2 minutes this morning. Appreciate your overview of this, and thank you very much. Next, we will move on to Senate File 2255. And members, in your packet, you'll see an A1 and an A25 amendment. There's the committee engrossment, and that's CE1. And then there's a PowerPoint from MDE with 2 spreadsheets. So it's a pretty hefty amount of information. But we're going to start Senate File 2255. I have the A1 amendment, which will update the bill with the revised budget recommendation. If anyone has any questions? No? All right, seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Senator Uma Verbaden. Seeing any opposed? All right, the A1 is adopted. Then we will go on to move the A25 amendment. This is the forecast adjustment from February, from the February forecast. And again, members, any questions? Senator Makway.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know if I have the A25. I have an A1 and an A2. Thank you. It was stuck behind A1. Thank you.
Great. Any other burning questions? Nope. Okay. All in favor, please, here's Senator Farnsworth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You said we're on the 825,
Yes.
is that correct? So I'm just wondering if somebody, I've been getting a lot of emails about the non-public student aid. I'm wondering if somebody can explain the change on this amendment in regards to the non-public student aid.
Yes, Ms. Hofer, would you give us an explanation, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair and Senator Farnsworth for the question. So the A25 updates the forecast adjustments article, which is the final article of Senate File 2255. So this makes adjustments to appropriations for fiscal year 2025, so they align with the February forecast. And this is done typically because there are changes in the forecasted programs due to things like pupil counts or actual costs for the program. So I think you're probably looking at lines 1.5 through 1.11 of the amendment, and you see a reduction in the amount of the appropriation, and that's to correspond with the forecast because there was a reduction in the amount of non-public pupil education aid necessary to fulfill the entitlements to the districts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the emails that I've been getting and every indication was that the governor wanted to eliminate non-public aid, but would this indicate that he is now planning on keeping non-public aid in his budget proposal?
Ms. Hofer?
Madam Chair, Senator Farnsworth, thank you for the question. This only affects the appropriations that have already gone out the door. So for fiscal year 24 and 25, the governor's proposals to eliminate the non-public pupil aids were contained in the underlying bill, Senate File 2255, and that would be for fiscal year 26 and forward.
Senator Farnsworth, done? Okay. Any other questions? All right. So with that, all in favor of the A25 amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, seeing none, the A25 is amended. So members, next the MDE will walk through and you'll want to follow the CE1 bill. This was put together by SCARFA to reflect the amendment that we just adopted. We are not going to be taking any amendments today, so please hold your questions until the end of each section. So we'll pause after each section and give MDE time to respond to your inquiries. And with that, we may begin. I think our first testifier today is Mr. Adosh Uni, Director of Government Relations with the Minnesota Department of Education. And we also have Ms. Kathy Erickson, who's the Director of School Finance, Minnesota Department of Education, and Sammy Rajab, Assistant Director of Government Relations at the Minnesota Department of Education. And I don't know what order you're going to do, but you know the drill. Please introduce yourself for the record, and you may begin.
Good morning, Madam Chair, committee members. My name is Adosh Uni. I am the Director of Government Relations for the Minnesota Department of Education. And as you had mentioned, Madam Chair, with me I have our School Finance Director, Kathy Erickson, and our Assistant Director of Government Relations, Sammy Rajab, here to help with the presentation. And thank you for the opportunity to provide the Governor's 2025 education budget for this year. Commissioner Jett does send his apologies to the committee for not being able to join you all this morning, but wants me to express that as we enter the final weeks of session, he is eager to continue working with all of you in creating a balanced and effective investment in our state's education system. Just like to start off by saying in 2023 and 2024, we engaged in historic legislative sessions, especially in education, where together the state progressed significantly in a range of critical education programs on behalf of Minnesota students, educators, families, schools, and communities. Just to highlight a few of the fundamental investments that were made in those sessions, we provided an automatic inflator for the general education formula, providing assurance for our schools that additional flexible funding for all programming will be coming each year. We made significant gains in supporting our students who receive special education services, making up for the funding that the federal government continually has not provided. And we made sure no child is hungry while at school by making sure that all students are entitled to a free breakfast and lunch during the school year, while we also boosted compensatory revenue, which funds programs for our most underserved students. We boosted resources for our English learners, a historically underfunded student group, and in 2027, we will be funding the EL cross-subsidy at 25%. The legislature made massive advances in literacy education with the READ Act, completely reforming how students are taught reading and investing in educator training. We worked together and with DEED to open the unemployment insurance during the summer term for hourly school workers for the first time. This provides these staff members with more viable positions from year to year. Thank you for providing more dedicated resources for our American Indian students, some of our most underserved in the state. We know that Minnesota has some of the worst support personnel to student ratios in the country, and that is why aid to support the hiring of these staff members and a pipeline program to recruit more are so essential for our students' well-being. So shifting to what we have in front of us, we know the November forecast laid a critical task before us, and the February forecast strengthened our focus on that task. How do we maintain our priorities to fund Minnesota's public education system on behalf of our students and educators, with also the responsibility to balance our state's budget? The 2025 governor's education budget does propose to do that. It balances a narrow set of urgent and prioritized needs with ideas on how we can reach a balanced budget. We will address the proposed reductions at the top of my remarks here. The bill, as introduced, proposes reductions to QComp, special education transportation, special transportation aid, and non-public education aid streams. Because of the February forecast, the revised budget now also includes the elimination of the compensatory pilot program, elimination of long-term facilities maintenance for charter schools, reductions to Grow Your Own, reductions to school library aid, and more revisions which we'll address in the overview. I want to be clear, as the governor has stated several times, this is a starting place for a conversation around this incredibly important and difficult task. We are here and we must rise to the occasion together. The governor, MDE, and all the staff welcome other balanced solutions that also maintain the important strides we have made. Addressing the investments the governor proposes, the agency believes that these are necessary and doable, and they support shared values. I'm going to mention just a few of the bigger items within the budget. The governor has proposed an enterprise-wide fraud prevention and program integrity initiative. This budget provides critical staffing and software to enhance our legal capacities to support the more effective delivery of resources for our students and protect taxpayer dollars. As Commissioner Jett mentioned, in 2023, we provided a significant investment for our most underserved students by boosting compensatory revenue. However, we recognize that work needs to be done to maintain this investment on a more stable trajectory. We propose a one-time boost to the program and task a working group to recommend a solution for future years. Providing our hourly workers, extremely important members of our education teams, with viable positions and meeting their needs is critical for our students' education. In this beginning phase of unemployment insurance for hourly workers during the summer term, one-time additional funding is needed to help our schools successfully continue to meet their obligations under this program. Ms. Erickson and I will provide a more detailed overview of the items mentioned, as well as a tailored set of other proposals we believe are important for Minnesota's education system. Governor and the Commissioner believe this is a balanced package that maintains the historic progress made in the past few years for Minnesota's students, educators, families, and schools, provides necessary funds for critical programs, and opens the conversation for difficult decisions we must make together. And now I'll proceed into the presentation. I'll just note at the top, Ms. Erickson and I will trade off some slides here and there, so appreciate the patience when we flip back and forth, maybe slide to slide. Since we introduced ourselves, Madam Chair, I wonder if we can dispense from introducing ourselves before each slide when we switch off.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Next slide. So as I mentioned at the top, there obviously is, from the November forecast and the February forecast, a projected surplus in the first biennium and then a projected deficit in the second biennium. I think it's bear mentioning that the surplus after the February forecast in the first biennium is roughly $450 million, and then the projected shortfall in the second biennium is just under $6 billion. Both of these were significantly adjusted from the February forecast. So that kind of lays out the task at hand in front of us, and the governor has responded with the education budget that we're going to go through. And you can see at the top in the table, these are the totals from all of the proposals. There is in the first biennium, there is an ask for roughly around $95 million in spends, but then around $350 million in reductions, resulting in around $260 million in reductions in the first biennium. Then in the second biennium, the totals will be around $460 million in reductions in the tails. Next slide, please. And with that, I will pass it off to my colleague, Ms. Erickson.
Madam Chair, members, my name is Kathy Erickson, Director of School Finance for the Minnesota Department of Education. I'll be going through slides related to Article 1. Our first slide is the governor recommending the elimination of non-public pupil transportation aid starting in fiscal year 26. This would result in a reduction of approximately $57.5 million in the first biennium, 26 and 27, and $61.3 million in the second biennium, 27 and 28. This bill would also eliminate the obligations for school districts to provide that transportation that is currently in law. This bill also would include not paying the 10% reconciliation for the payment for fiscal year 25 in the 90-10 distribution we have for revenues related to non-public pupil aid. There was also an additional reduction through the interaction of transportation sparsity of approximately $543,000 in 27, and then $1.32 million in fiscal years 28 and 29 in the second biennium. We also, the governor is recommending the elimination of the non-public pupil education aid. This is a school district obligation to provide those services would also be eliminated. The three main areas in which non-publics can collect aid supporting the following services: textbooks, individualized instruction materials or standardized tests, health services, and then guidance and counseling services. This would result in a reduction of approximately $52.5 million in the first biennium, 26 and 27, and $57.7 million in fiscal years 28 and 29 of the second biennium. This bill would also eliminate the 10% reconciliation payment. That would be the 10% cleanup payment for fiscal year 25. We also the governor is recommending a modification to our compensatory calculation for fiscal year 26 only. This would utilize our current formula rather than transitioning to the new formula that is in law to go into effect in fiscal year 26, using only direct certification counts. This modification would use the greater of the pupil counts in fiscal year 24 or fiscal year 26. And this would be freezing compensatory pupil units, not funding, and would include both paper forms and direct certification counts in the modification. This bill would require an investment of approximately $55 million, with $50 million in fiscal year 26 and the 10% cleanup payment of $5.5 million in fiscal year 27. This bill also recommends a compensatory revenue working group, which would review several options for the stability and continuation of compensatory revenue going into the future. And there is an expected cost of approximately $94,000 for that working group. And again, this portion of the governor's proposal is for 1 year only. This would be a 1 year continuation of a modified hold harmless. In fiscal year 25 right now, we are also in a hold harmless based on 24 or 25 pupil counts. The governor is also recommending the elimination of the compensatory pilot program. The pilot program started back in 2005. It had 5 school districts, and now 7 school districts receive additional compensatory revenue. The total would result in fiscal years 26 and 27 of a reduction of about $6.59 million. And in the next biennium, approximately 14.6, it is about $7.325 million per year for these districts in additional compensatory funding, in addition to the regular calculation of compensatory funding. Also in Article 1, there is a recommendation from the governor for unemployment insurance aid to be able to be funded with all aid through the end of fiscal year 26. Right now, we would need approximately $30 million to add to fiscal year 26, which would allow us, based on our estimates, to pay full aid of approximately $63 million in fiscal year 26. This is based on estimates that we have. Currently, we, in the fall each year, we survey all LEAs to determine what their expected unemployment costs would be so that we can estimate what those reimbursements will look like. And so far, and we are still in the reconciliation process for 2024, we hope to have those final payments out here in April. But we, based on our information that we have so far, between fiscal year 24 and 25, we will spend approximately $102 million of the $135 million that was put into the unemployment special fund in the fiscal year or in the 2023 legislative session. So that would leave us approximately $33 million at the end of fiscal year 25. And again, we're asking for that additional amount of $30 million to get us to that point in which we could fully pay fiscal year 26, and then going forward, we would see what we could do. There's also an additional revisor instruction to amend the statutory grant language to allow tribal contract schools to be considered for all grants in which school districts and charter schools may apply. So that's also in Article 1, and I will pause for Adosh.
Thank you. Any questions in Article 1? Senator Farnsworth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So as I said, I've been getting a ton of emails about the non-public pupil aid, and I'm wondering, in the governor's budget proposal, is there an assumption of how much it would cost if a certain percentage of the private school kids start attending public school, and then the state has to start paying the formula and compensatory aid for all of those students?
Mr. Unas.
Madam Chair, Senator Farnsworth, I don't believe that we've run any of those calculations or those estimates.
Senator Farnsworth.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. So I just did kind of some napkin math here. And it appears that the governor is intending to save somewhere around $110 million per year, give or take a few $1 million, by eliminating this. And if the Google AI search is correct, as I'm assuming it is, because AI will rule the world one day, there are 88,000 private school, K-12 private school kids in Minnesota, saving the state $10,000 per kid for 88,000 kids. Now, I don't really know the number of kids that would end up attending public school that couldn't, if they didn't have a bus ride to their private school. I don't know the number, so I'm just estimating maybe 25% of those kids, or 22,000 of those kids might start attending a public school. 22,000 times 10,000 per year is $220 million. So while the governor is attempting to save money by eliminating non-public aid, he's probably going to end up costing the state maybe an additional $100 million or more. If all of those 88,000 went to a public school, it would be significantly more. So I think we really need to look at this. I don't think it's going to save the amount of money that the governor thinks, because then we're going to end up paying around $10,000 per year for all of the kids that enroll in a public school. So as I said, I'm probably getting more emails about that than I am anything else right now, and I really think this is something that we need to consider. Is it going to save money, or is it actually going to cost money? And I would argue it's probably going to cost the state more money by making this change. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Farnsworth. Anybody else? Oh, Senator Cruin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Following up on that, on the elimination of non-public, underneath that, you have a sub-bullet point about additional reduction due to the interaction with transportation sparsity. Can you walk me through what due to the interaction with, what that means and why there's that reduction to transportation sparsity?
Ms. Erickson?
Madam Chair, Senator, as we looked at the calculation for transportation sparsity, which all LEAs can be eligible for, there is a part of the calculation that looks at the non-public pupil counts. And if we do not have those in that transportation sparsity calculation, then the overall transportation sparsity allocation or entitlement is going down.
Follow-up, Senator?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just so I'm kind of in simple terms, so basically if non-public students are no longer calculated into transportation, they will also be removed from the transportation sparsity formulas so that districts that are relying on transportation sparsity will get less money. Is that kind of a simple way of restating it?
Yes.
Ms. Erickson?
Madam Chair, Representative, Senator, yes.
Any other questions? All right, well, then we can go on to Article 2, please.
Madam Chair, moving on to Article 2, the first item that we have in that article is the elimination of the computer science education advancement program. This is a combination of grants and a computer science supervisor at the Department of Education that was created in 2023. $350,000 is for competitive grants to LEAs, and $150,000 a year is for the computer science supervisor to coordinate activities and run that program. This would also result not only in the elimination of the grants, but associated activities that the computer science supervisor would oversee, such as data analysis, support for the grants, and periodic updates to the state's computer science strategic plan, which was submitted into 2024. The total reduction would be $1 million per biennium. The next item is a no-cost item. It's a modification to the Achievement and Integration Program Administration. Since the inception of this program, we've had an increase of around, I think, 100 districts. I'll have to get the exact number, but a large amount of districts participating in the Achievement and Integration Program, which provides funding for achievement and integration programming. This has not resulted in a corresponding adjustment to the amount of set-aside that the department has for administration for this program. Currently, we have 0.3% of the allocation, which I believe funds about 2.2 staff members. We do supplement this staffing with an additional 0.8 to have 3 FTEs in this program. We're asking for and bumping it up by 1 percentage point to 1.3%. I do believe that this brings us up to somewhere in range of 5.5 FTEs that this would cover. We do provide pretty rigorous support to districts in submitting their plans and adjusting their plans to meet their achievement and integration goals. One of the items that the OLA recommended was better program monitoring and oversight by the department, as well as an adjustment that we have in there for requiring districts to have more authority in their readjustment of their plans should they not be meeting their goals, rather than the department having a full control over that. But we still do believe that with the dramatic increase over the last 10 years in the participants in the program, that an increase in the current set-aside at no cost to the state would help us with oversight of the program and effectiveness of the program. Next slide, please. Next item is an adjustment to the literacy incentive aid formula. We would be eliminating the MCA data, which is based on proficiency and growth from that data as a factor and replacing it with poverty data. This recalculation of the aid would be revenue neutral. It, again, replaces proficiency and growth with the poverty-based calculation. It does not, our proposal does not modify the eligible uses for literacy incentive aid. I do believe those were modified in the last legislative session alongside changes made under the READ Act, and it repeals the current literacy incentive aid subdivisions from statute. Next item is no-cost proposal around full-service community schools. The funding was provided for, funding for this program was initially provided on a one-time basis in 2016. For 2 years, the program was funded again in 2023, one-time basis for, I think, $10 million. The funding was only allocated for 2 years. The best practices and how these programs are operated around the state, around the country, is on a 3-year basis. And so we're asking for the program to be extended for another year through June 30th, 2027 for these individual grantees to be able to operate on the 3-year cycle. And then there's another no-cost item on this slide. It is a reading core grant that was shifted over to DCYF initially, and then it was agreed upon between the agencies and Reading Corps that the best place for this to live in terms of the relationships and the program oversight is at the department, and so we're doing a no-cost adjustment to statute to ensure that it continues to be overseen by MDE. Next slide, please.
Are we taking questions for Article 2?
Don't we finishing? Is this Article 2 or Article 3?
I'm on 3.
All right, that was Article 2. Any questions on Article 2? I have one under on page 9, under modifying achievement and integration program administration. I guess my question is, what will look differently by increasing these support systems and these dollars to the LEIs? What is the return on the investment in that area?
Madam Chair, thanks for the question. So, the numbers that I had tried to pull out of a hat, but now I've got them in front of me. So the program, when it initiated, was about 53 LEAs participating, and we've moved up to 180. In that interim, we've seen some OLA reports around the effectiveness of the program and around, do the LEAs participating in the program fully understand down to the nuance level of what the allowable expenditures are. We made adjustments in 2014, I think, to the program, but the program has increased while our staffing has not increased. And moving from 2.2 state funded to supplementing it with 3.0 FTEs to support 180 LEAs doesn't allow us the maximum ability to provide that technical assistance and ongoing coaching for the program to really maximize the effectiveness of those dollars for the intended purpose of student achievement and integrated environments in these districts. And this is all around the state. There's 180 LEAs. It's districts that do qualify based on their metrics. There are districts that can voluntarily enter the program because they're adjacent to districts that do have to participate in the program, and then there are districts that have identified schools that have to participate. So it's really about enhancing our ability to provide ongoing and timely assistance, oversight, and monitoring to these programs.
Thank you. Just to be clear, did you say it grew from 53 to 180 or
Yes.
108?
180.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right. Well, that ends Article 2, Education Excellence. Now we are on to Article 3 for teachers.
Madam Chair, members, on slide 11, the governor is recommending the closure of the Alternative Teacher Compensation, or QComp program, starting in fiscal year 27, so it will still be intact in fiscal year 26, starting July 1. Currently, it is estimated that we have approximately 111 school districts, 71 charter schools, 1 intermediate, and 1 education district. This was based on last year's numbers that are participating. This is a capped appropriation, meaning that once all of the funds are distributed, no other districts or charters or other LEAs can participate. We do currently have a waiting list for districts, charters, and other LEAs that would like to participate. The elimination would also have a levy component, so there would be a cleanup payment on the pay 26 levy that would be calculated this summer for fiscal year 27 for the complete closure of the program. And then if there are any remaining funds through aid or levy in a fund balance, that fund balance was created last session to track the amount of unused Q-comp funding in our LEAs. Any of those remaining funds would be used for teacher incentive pay until those funds are exhausted, if a district does have any funds left over prior to the end of fiscal year 26. This would result in a reduction of approximately $79 million in fiscal year 27, just the second half of the first biennium, and approximately $174 million in the second biennium, 28 and 29. There would also be a general $40 million reduction in the levy starting in fiscal year 27. Thank you.
Madam Chair, committee members, the next two items in our package are no-cost transfers from Pelsby over to MDE in 2024, 23, 24. The department combined several divisions and staff members into a more effective educator workforce center focused on building out the profession, as well as providing targeted and broad-based supports to the educator profession. With that adjustment, MDE increased its capacity to an expertise to be able to oversee more programs that impact the teaching profession. In collaboration with Pelsby, it was decided that our Educator Workforce Center would be a great location to oversee the CUGMAC, or Collaborative Urban and Greater Minnesota Educators of Color Grant Program, as well as the Teacher Mentorship and Retention Program. Again, these are no-cost transfers from Pelsby over to MDE to oversee and run. These would also come with the FTEs that currently exist overseeing those two programs. They would not result in an increased ask for more FTE support at MDE. It would be a simple transfer over. This is a $5.44 million grant for CUGMAC, as well as a $4.5 million grant under Teacher Mentorship and Retention. Next slide, please. The next item in our proposal, or next set of items, are around student support personnel. As I mentioned up at the top, one of our great investments in 2023 was around creating targeted aid for bringing on student support personnel like nurses, psychologists, social workers, psychologists. This did come with a range of uses for student support personnel aid. To maximize the effectiveness of this program, we are suggesting a couple modifications to the uses of student support personnel aid. One is to maintain the position for uses of the aid, to maintain the position if they lost due to declining enrollment, cover the costs of planning and implementing job-embedded coaching, and covering the material costs of evidence-based, culturally responsive curricula and programs. We also have in that proposal an adjustment to the an adjustment to the aid flow to allow it to be directed directly to cooperative units rather than funds flowing through member districts. We've worked collaboratively with the cooperatives over the interim to try to come to a workable solution in that space. Alongside the Student Support Personnel Aid Program, we also passed a grant program for the student support personnel to create more student personnel by building up the pipeline of eligible candidates. We are making a no-cost, very simple technical change to the name of the program to Support Personnel Pathway Grant Program, which is more in line with the best practices around how those types of programs are viewed by users and eligible candidates. Next slide, please. This slide is another reduction. This is in a teacher support program around Grow Your Own grants. This is a reduction of the Grow Your Own program by $8 million annually beginning in fiscal 26. We do believe that program demand has been steady, and based on previous grant cycles, sufficient funds do exist to meet the demand in future years. So this would be an adjustment to the base funding down to just roughly $24 million annually. And so on a biennial basis, this would be a $16 million reduction to the program. Next slide, please. Oh, and that concludes Article 3, Madam Chair.
Members, questions on Article 3? Senator Farnsworth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm wondering on the Q-Comp proposal, so a lot of schools, when they're negotiating their contracts, this is considered, I think, part of the salary, and so they maybe negotiate a lower salary because they know they're going to get the Q-Comp dollars. So I'm wondering, is there any future proposal or any idea on how to help schools that currently do Q-Comp to be able to increase wages because they're losing this funding? Or is it just going to be expected that school districts have to eat the cost in negotiations with the teachers' collective bargaining units?
Mr. Uni?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Senator Farnsworth. I mean, I think that's the challenge that we're confronted with here today, is trying to balance, and this session is trying to provide a balanced budget. The governor has mentioned again that these were starting places for a conversation about what the magnitude of reductions would be needed to meet the balanced budget. This is an important question that you're bringing up in terms of how, if any of these were to pass, how districts manage their local budgets to be able to meet that. We all hope that in future years, and soon, that there's opportunities for added investments to be able to make up for those so that districts can maintain their operations and programming for their students, which also includes making sure that they are able to bring on the most highly qualified staff. But in this package, the proposal right now is the elimination, starting in fiscal 27, for the elimination of the Q-Comp program.
Senator Kroon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll jump in there. For the districts that rely on Q-Comp, what it means is that teachers will make less money. Thanks.
Senator Swedzinski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So do we know how many teachers, I mean, I see on slide 11, 111 school districts, 71 charter schools, 1 intermediate, but how many teachers that would be?
Mr. Uni.
Madam Chair, Chair Swedzinski, I will have to look in for that. I might be able to get that during this hearing, but I just need a little bit of time to dig.
Thank you. I'd appreciate that. And because I do share the concern of Senator Farnsworth and perhaps the unintended consequence of the teacher layoffs that might result, because how many of the coaches, Q-Comp coaches, would be back in the classrooms with the elimination of the program. And so how many layoffs would there be of, generally speaking, first, second, third, fourth year teachers, because most of the Q-Comp coaches are senior teachers. So I'm just thinking through one of the unintended consequences of getting, and I empathize with what you guys are going through right now as well. But I'm just trying to figure out the Q-Comp thing.
Yep.
Mr. Uni.
Madam Chair, one thing I would note is that, the Q-Comp program isn't necessarily implemented with the dollars the same way in each recipient district. Some may spend it on specific coaches. Some may spend it on stipends. Some may completely spend it on their professional development communities. And so I'm going to look for the specific numbers of the educators in the LEAs that receive Q-Comp, but they may not always be benefiting from that program or impacted by that program in the same way. So I'll just make that note.
Thank you. Senator Swedzinski, follow up? Okay. Do you know on average what the stipend is for a teacher that does receive a stipend? It varies across the districts, am I correct?
Correct. The understanding is that it could vary. I mean, I've heard anywhere from, couple $100s, couple $1,000s to some districts that may skew to a minimal amount to focus the funding more on professional development.
Okay. And is that negotiated through bargaining, or is that set by the district specifically?
I think, Madam Chair, that I think it's both. I think it is negotiated as well as it can be set by the LEA.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, that was Article 3, and we're going to move on to Article 4, American Indian Education.
Madam Chair, to begin Article 4, we have two items on American Indian education. The one at the bottom is just associated with non-public education aid from the first article. It is a technical language strike in the American Indian Education Aid program with the elimination of non-public pupil education aid from within the governor's package. There needs to just be a corresponding strike of this language in that statute. Under the Minnesota Indian Teacher Training Program in the initial package, and then we had a tweak in the revised budget to clarify that. So combined, it clarifies that this program is for candidates who participate in the program. So this is about increasing the number of Minnesota Indian teachers in the classroom. That we were finding out that some members or some candidates were matriculating through the program and then going into the higher education setting to teach there. And the intention of this program was about bringing candidates out to teach in the E through 12 setting. Our initial budget had said K through 12. We worked with our colleagues over at DCYF to make sure that we could expand that to E through 12. So that's why you'll see a change item in both the initial budget proposals as well as the revised budget. It's just a technical change from K to E, or kindergarten to early education. Next slide, please. I think
That ends Article 4. Any
yes,
questions
that
on
is
that?
Article 4, Madam Chair.
That page. All right, we will move on then to Article 5, Special Education.
Madam Chair, Senators, Article 5 has two components related to special education. One is the governor's recommendation to eliminate the charter school tuition adjustment. Right now, charter schools can bill for up to 80% of their unreimbursed cost tuition bill to their the member resident districts who are in their charter schools, and then they can send unreimbursed costs for state aid to pick up the difference between the unreimbursed costs that are billed and then the state aid would cover. Overall, under current law, charter schools are covered with state aid between 94 and 96% of their costs. By this elimination, that would reduce it to roughly 90 to 92%, so that they would then be absorbing part of that unreimbursed cost, just like when districts have unreimbursed costs and have their limits, it's getting more into an alignment. This would save approximately $21 million in the first biennium, 26 and 27, and about $25.7 million in 28 and 29. Again, this is just a holdback of what would be additional state aid reimbursements under charter school tuition agreements. The second piece of the governor's recommendation under special education is to reduce the amount of special education transportation reimbursement. Right now, under current statute, and I will preface by saying that the special education laws are very complex and our formulas are complex, and we often talk as if special education transportation is fully covered as a reimbursable cost under the special education formula. But here, what we would be doing over time would be in fiscal year 26, reducing the reimbursement for transportation from 100% to 95%. And then in fiscal years 27 and beyond, it would be reimbursed at 90%. Other elements of special education are reimbursed at a percentage rate less than 100%. So this would just be a small adjustment to push back a little bit of those aids back in for cost savings that would not be paid out as reimbursements. And again, the reimbursement would result in an approximate savings of $58.9 million in the first biennium, because this would start in fiscal year 26, and $60.2 million in the second biennium of 27 or 28 and 29. And that is Article 5.
Questions, anyone? Senator Kroon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On the charter, the elimination of special education charter tuition adjustment, it'll go down to 90 to 92% annually. You said where it's at now, but I didn't get that in my notes. What's that percentage at now?
Madam Chair, Senator, approximately 94 to 96%.
Follow-up, anyone? All right, thank you. Oh, Senator Clark.
Sorry, one quick question, sort of following up with what Senator Kroon said. Just on average, how do public schools make up for those special education funds? So with the transfer over, are they getting reimbursed from the state? Is it property taxes, something else? Where are those funds? And then in comparison, I guess, to charter schools or others?
Ms. Erickson.
Madam Chair, Senator, thank you for the question. We want to make sure we keep in mind that when there are unreimbursed costs that are not a part of a aid adjustment, those will go into the cross-subsidy calculation. So some of these funds will then be made up by the, as we go into fiscal year 27, 50% of unreimbursed costs will fall under that. Otherwise, as we know right now, for all of the current unreimbursed special education costs, those are usually borne by their general fund. So they're finding other ways in which to find coverage for those unreimbursed costs.
Senator Clark.
Chair Kunesh, you said there. Who was the there in their general fund? The charter schools or the group that they're getting reimbursement from?
Ms. Erickson.
Madam Chair, Senator, both. So depending on where the billing is coming from, you know, if the bills are higher, then that resident district is paying that. And then for anything that's unreimbursed at the charter school's general fund would have to probably cover those costs. Thank you.
Anything else? All right.
Madam Chair, members, Article 6 is facilities. We have two items under the Article 6. One is the governor is proposing eliminating the long-term facilities maintenance for charter schools. This is $132 per adjusted pupil unit that charter schools receive, but do not need to use it for LTFM purposes. These can be used for any purposes, any eligible expenditures in the charter school. And this would result in a savings of approximately $19.93 million in fiscal years 26 and 27 and $22.194 million in the second biennium 28 and 29. And then our second component is a no-cost clarification of definitions in the lease levy authority. We are just making sure that as we're seeing different types of lease levy proposals, that we're all in alignment with what the definitions are. These would include definitions for capital lease, criteria for approval, instructional purposes, joint leases, other leases, and making sure that the recognition of a review and comment for leases over $2 million. Also in Article 6, we do have some reduction in telecommunications equity aid. This is a small entitlement each year, which is already being prorated. So the amount of submissions for reimbursement under telecommunications aid are already higher than what our annual appropriation is. But this governor's proposal would reduce telecom equity aid by $750,000 in 26 or 27 and $750,000 in 28 and 29, which would represent a 10% reduction in the aid. And with that, that's Article 6.
Any questions on Article 6? All right. Oh, question here. Senator Gustafson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I apologize, I was slow to it. I had to look up something. Is it okay if we just go back to charter schools for a moment? Is that all right? I'll give you a second if you have to go back.
Article which?
I'm sorry, that's Article 5 on charter schools and eliminating special education and transportation. So we know that charter schools have a rough time funding anyways, and compared to their neighboring schools. For instance, I have one that's not quite in my district, but a lot of my constituents go to that school. It's Leela, and it's up in Forest Lake. Forest Lake gets about $2,000 more per pupil than the charter school next to it, and it's a pretty robust one. So I know that they all come in different shapes and sizes, but this one is does very well, wins awards, and it's pretty big. It has elementary, middle school, and high school. So for them, they have a quite quite a lot of expenses, and they're not able to raise money in the same way the public schools. I know I'm telling you all the stuff that you already know. But I guess my question for you is, one of the things that I've been hearing from all of my families who go to schools like this is, are there any strategies that can be employed to address the funding disparities that are faced by charter schools? Are there any discussions about how else they can raise those funds? Because they are public school students as well. Is there any, I don't see anything in the governor's proposal, but maybe there are thoughts on other ways that would allow them to have some of that funding, some equity in funding.
Mr. Gurney?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Senator Gustafson, again, I think this is an important question. You know, I would point back to the significant funding that was provided in 23-24 as a great starting place. It set us on a great base. We've got the inflator for the general education fund. So we're going to see that continually grow every single, under current law, every single year. And districts and charters are going to know that that funding is increasing earlier in the process than we usually find out in May. This is a question that goes to the tough task in front of us. Unfortunately, the governor obviously always would like to put funding into education where the budget allows. And you've seen that session after session after session since he's taken office. Unfortunately, in this situation where we've had the budget deficit in front of us, we've had to look at more targeted funding amounts like compensatory revenue, unemployment insurance, and a few smaller other items. But in this situation, yes, you're right. The governor's package does not include other strategies for raising funds. I know there's other considerations at the legislature right now. I would say that with whatever conversations there are around now or in future sessions, MDE, the governor, are always there to look at shared solutions.
Senator Farnsworth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I don't have a question. I'm just, I'm kind of flabbergasted. I have 2 charter schools in my district, and I had the opportunity to tour one of them a few weeks ago. And there are kids that are succeeding in that charter school that didn't succeed in public school. They wouldn't succeed in the big public schools. And these are valuable schools. And the thing that I'm flabbergasted about is you mentioned unemployment. And we talked about this last week. We passed unemployment for workers who knew they were accepting a 9-month job. And we're spending over $100 million to pay for unemployment for people who took a job that they knew was a 9-month job. And it's taking away from things like our charter schools, where we have suicidal kids, where we have kids that are being bullied in the public school, and they go to a charter school and they find a home and they find friends and they find staff on a smaller level that cares about them. The priorities in this budget are a joke. They are a joke. And I want to remind everybody, we had $18 billion and nobody said no to anything. And now we're telling these kids that are suicidal, that have mental health problems, that have found a home in our charter schools, we're telling them, we're not going to give you long-term facility maintenance because you don't matter as much as the public schools do. But, we're going to do unemployment for people who knowingly took a 9-month job. And by the way, in my town, a lot of those people took the summer jobs, and now these small employers can't hire people for the summer jobs because people are taking advantage of the system. This is a joke. We are hurting kids with this. We're hurting kids that go to private school. We're hurting kids that go to charter schools. And it just makes me angry if you can't tell. Because these are the kids that are the most vulnerable, and these are the ones we're going to cut. This is ridiculous. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Gustafson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of quick questions. One, just to go back, there's a lot of what Senator Farnsworth said I agree with. These are good schools, and there's a reason that they've chosen to go to a charter school. It's still a public school, but for whatever reason, their local public school wasn't offering something that their child needed. So I do want to advocate for charter schools. I don't know that I go down the same road about mental health that Senator Farnsworth brought up. In fact, I would remind everybody that in 2023, we added a lot of provisions for mental health things that you voted against. So I don't want it to seem as if that isn't a priority to us or the governor as well. But I will just say that if you have any advice for charter schools on what they should do, looking at this budget, and I know it's a place for a conversation starter, but it does leave us with a lot of answers or a lot of things that questions that we can't answer. They are strapped by their ability to raise funding. These are good schools, at least the ones I know in my district, good schools. The families and the children there love their schools, want to do well, and a lack of funding for special ed funding and transportation is a slap in the face. So if you have suggestions going forward, and maybe these are rooms for conversations as we're all putting our budgets together, but I just don't know that I can support funding cuts to special ed for our charter schools. So thank you for listening, but please help us find ways that we can provide more equitable funding for charters. Thanks.
Any more questions or comments? All right. If there's no response, we can go on to Article 7. Is that what we're on? School nutrition and libraries.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before I start in on this article, I do have an answer for Senator Swedzinski's question around how many educators are covered under QCOMP. What I have from the June 2024 STAR report, which Pelsby runs, it's around 39,400 educators. There's about 55.2% of educators. Beginning on this article, Madam Chair, we've got three no-cost proposals. The first is part of the fraud detection and prevention, anti-fraud and prevention program that the governor, or package that the governor has proposed across agencies. This is part of the MDE's one. This is in the revised budget. This amends the application criteria for non-school sponsors in child and adult food care or child and adult care food programs, as well as the summer food service program, or CACFP and SFSP, to include staffing requirements and growth restrictions, and provide guidance for boards. It's just specifically the new criteria will require non-school sponsors to have one full-time finance director, define expectations around the authority granted to volunteers. The max growth limits will for the number as well as a number of sponsored sites, and total reimbursements will be at a 25% growth. They can't grow any more than that. And then there's clear expectations on board structures, as well as public access to board meetings, and that a requirement for MDE to post reasonable salary ranges expected for the non-school sponsors. We're still on that side. In the next item for no cost proposal is in the school service fund, removing the ability for school administration to charge their time to nonprofit food service account for supervision, unless that supervision is a primary job duty of that staff. And then it also removes the responsibility of a deficit of the of that account from the food service management company. And then for the summer electronic benefit transfer program, or summer EBT, we are repurposing an incentivization program. A small amount has been set aside for years that we have come forward with to propose to repurpose. It's $150,000, would be reallocated from an incentivization bucket over to helping schools for their work on uploading data for summer EBT. And that's a program that gives families funding on a weekly basis for affording nutritious meals over the summer.
Thank you, Mr. Uni. Any questions on that? I have one question. When you talk about restricting, let's see, page 19. Where am I? here we go. Food Service Fund, Section 2, remove the ability for school administration to charge their time to the non-profit food service account. And for supervision, unless that supervision is a primary job duty of the staff. If a school, schedules like a para or a educational assistant to do their lunchroom duty, or they pull any other staff in whose primary job is to not participate in the lunchroom program, is that also excluded then? They cannot charge that back?
Madam Chair, that's a good question. I believe the way we've written is it's around school administration costs. So school administrator costs assigned to the supervision of the school lunchroom. And so I'm not sure about the implication for if it were a para or other educator professional in the room, but I believe the way we've written it is it applies to administrators.
So,
Okay,
yeah. look-
Madam Chair, but my apologies. I think we did adjust that. That was the initial, I spoke to the initial drafting that we had. I do believe we adjusted it from administrator to staff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so on line 66.12, lunchroom supervision is stricken. So what exactly is supervision? How would you define that?
Madam Chair, that would be when an individual, so there's an adult on staff monitoring the cafeteria for student behavior, making sure that students are safely into the cafeteria, monitoring the clock in terms of being able to come in on time, leaving on time. That supervision responsibility also assists teachers with their schedules so that the students are coming in an effective, efficient manner and then leaving the cafeteria back to their other assigned classes or times to keep the schedule on track.
So would the long-term effect be that, like, para's time could be, like, billed back or covered under that or not?
Madam Chair, I believe that it would have to be the primary duty of that staff who's providing that supervision in the cafeteria for it to be assigned to that account.
Okay, thank you. Any questions other than? All right, we will move on now to Article. Oh, we're still on 7. School, which one? Libraries. Okay.
Madam Chair, members, the second slide on Article 7 relates to the governor's package, including a reduction to school library aid. The school library aid currently is an amount per pupil or a base amount of $40,000 for school districts, $20,000 for charter schools. School districts currently must reserve and use the school library aid for the allowable costs that are showing on this slide, including salaries and benefits of school library media specialists, electronic or computer audiovisual equipment, technology, other electronic and material resources, or furniture, equipment, or supplies. This would revise the amounts. The recommendation is a roughly 32% reduction in aid. So instead of the base minimums being $40,000 and $20,000, those would be reduced to that approximately 32% reduction. And then those that are qualifying for the per pupil amount because they have a higher amount of pupils, that per pupil amount would be reduced as well to have a proposed savings of $7.5 million in 2027. And then from fiscal years 28 and 29 would be approximately $15 million per biennium. And that is the remainder of Article 7.
Any questions on the rest? All right, I see that we don't have an Article 8 page. Those are appropriations. So then do we jump to Article 9, which is community ed and lifelong learning?
Madam Chair, members, the community education, the governor is proposing to reduce the equalization aid related to the community education revenue. So that would mean that the equalization formula would just, the aid share would be eliminated. That would cause the levy portion to be changed because the governor is not proposing any changes to the total revenue package. So this would not change any programmatic pieces, but the underlying revenue would now be levy. And this would be a reduction in state aid of approximately $14.99 million in fiscal years 26 and 27 and $15 million in fiscal years 28 and 29 in the second biennium. And that is Article 9.
Questions, comments? All right, let's go on to Article 10, state agencies.
Madam Chair, in the state agencies item, we do have several items that are additional proposals for spending. In the first item, there is a one-time ask for legal services costs of $6 million. This would cover our Office of General Counsel, use of the Attorney General's office and litigation costs. Then, as a part of the governor's anti-fraud and prevention program, we have an ask for $550,000 annually for 3 FTEs and software dedicated fraud detection in detail. There's one OIG investigator who would increase the capacity of that office to investigate fraud and waste and abuse complaints faster. There'll be 2 legal counsels out of the Office of General Counsel, one dedicated to assisting our charter center in the interpretation of state laws as well as federal requirements under our charter grant, and be able to provide help with legal oversight over the sector and increase program integrity, as well as one legal counsel for the nutrition programs to help navigate state and federal requirements and help with the various programs over there. And then the software would help the OIG, Office of Inspector General, conduct in-depth investigations and requires, would help the OIG conduct these investigations into fraud, waste, and abuse with software that would track cases and conduct financial analysis of programs. And then I believe one item that I think that's the last slide. I think one item that we may have missed on the presentation that you'll see in there is an ask for an operating adjustment. That is $677,000 in fiscal 26, $1.3 million in fiscal 27, and ongoing on an annual basis at that level. These are standard asks that we have in budget years to match for cost of living adjustments, salary adjustments, increase of rent, increase of minute costs. It's not asked for additional FTEs. It is for increase in costs at the agency. And Madam Chair, I believe that concludes our presentation.
Thank you. Senator Rarick, question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So on this last page under state agencies, after seeing all kinds of cuts being requested to non-public school funding, charter school funding, school district funding, special education, can you help us understand what cuts are coming to the department?
Yeah. Mr. Ernie.
Madam Chair, so one of the items that I mentioned is a cut to our computer science supervisor position. Our operating adjustment is lower than what we actually need. So that does result in cuts to IT programs that we'll need to fund, that will have some tough decisions around how to meet our rent that is due, as well as cost of living adjustments for salary benefits. On the side of we don't know what's coming in the future, 190 of our staff are funded from state funding, 243 are funded from federal funding. We're unsure of where we're going to be with the uncertainty at the federal level with programs that are funded from federal staff. I will just note for the committee that staff members that are funded with federal dollars, unless state programs are in there. The duties are basically duplicated by the federal requirements. They can't work on state-based programs. So from a few of the items that I've mentioned in terms of the reductions there and the uncertainty at the federal level, that's, I think, the items that would maybe answer your question.
Senator Rarick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think, I hope this committee is willing to take a long, hard look. If we're going to ask school districts and charter schools to tighten their belts and look at some of the cuts we've been proposing, we did not offer them near the same increase that we offered state agencies out of the last two cycles. If we're tightening belts, state agencies better be willing to tighten their belts just as much as we're asking anybody else to. I think that's, as Senator Farnsworth mentioned earlier, thinking this was a joke of a presentation, I think it is, I might not use joke, but I would say it is incredibly unbalanced. We are not looking across the board. We are specifically targeting certain areas, especially the non-public schools. And as Senator Farnsworth mentioned, I do not believe that that actually is going to save the state any money, because we're going to be driving students into public schools where the funding from the state is higher than it is if they're in a non-public school. So I hope we're going to be realistic. Madam Chair, I've appreciated working with you this year, and I hope the approach we will take will be far better than what we've just seen in front of us today.
Senator Kroon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On Article 10, $6 million in additional money to support legal costs. Can you walk me through what is going on at the Department of Education, why you need additional legal funds to staff your general counsel's office, the attorney general's office, and litigation costs? What's going on here? Why the increased need for these legal costs?
Mr. Uni.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Senator Kroon, thanks for the question. So our Office of General Counsel didn't start until, I think, 2021 or 2022. We've gotten legal funding over the past few cycles that we have used explicitly for the Office of General Counsel. So we use it for the head general counsel and the assistant general counsel. I believe we're asking for temporarily maintaining 2.3 FTEs. The funding that we use for the Attorney General's office is not for specifically for staffing. It's for the billables that we get for all of the legal services that we engage in under litigation, and they bill us for legal advice that we have to come to them at. We have several longstanding lawsuits that we've had to engage in a range of litigation costs. I know as an attorney you're familiar with how those can stack up in terms of discovery costs that engage there, as well as courtroom fees. So we have the Cruz Guzman case, we have the Scarak case out of St. Cloud, and we have the Lowe case that has engaged in a range of discovery. That's not to mention I can get the number of cases that we have for smaller cases that we're covering, but those that undergird the ongoing litigation costs that we have. Or legal costs, pardon me, Madam Chair.
Senator Kroon, continue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just add the Lowe case was entirely preventable and really falls out the governor's administration for why that case even exists. But I'll move on just to general comments. To me, unbalanced is a kind term that Senator Rarick used. I would kind of lean towards more Senator Farnsworth's comment about this budget being a joke. And I don't say that lightly, but it seems like the governor's proposal basically is going to war against non-public schools and charter schools. I don't see really any other way to interpret it. I agree with my colleagues that it may seem politically popular to go after non-publics, thinking there's a perception that that's just rich people that go to private schools. I think what we heard when they came to testify here today, that's not the case. There's a lot of non-public schools working in very challenging areas with low-income kids that are going to be hurt by this. And it's not going to save the money the governor thinks it's going to save, if any at all. because it's going to drive a lot of those kids into the public schools. So I think that's a misguided policy. The charter schools, they're already behind in funding and equity. They don't have the tools that traditional public schools have to raise revenue. There's all sorts of formulas where they already come out behind because of the inequities in the funding formulas. And to eliminate the long-term facility maintenance aid that the charter schools get, to me, just seems like I said, the governor's trying to put them out. They don't have other ways to make up those funds. To Senator Gustafson's point, there are no really other realistic ways to make up the funding inequities in charter schools unless we start talking about mandate relief. Of course, then that would apply to charter schools and traditional public schools, which I think we need to do. But this is a really tough proposal for charter schools to stomach. So I'm hoping that doesn't go forward and that we can do some work away from the governor's proposal on that. This proposal has cuts to teacher compensation. There's really no other way to put it. I know in one of my districts, QComp provides about $1.7 million. I'm told that for a tenured, high experienced teacher, that could, in that district, equate to about $3,400 a year in loss of compensation. So teacher compensation is going to get cut. Special education services, cuts to that. I mean, that's about the last place we should be looking to cut right now, is to our special education services, increasing the special education cross subsidy, which is not the direction where we should be going. There's some other things here that I don't agree with, but I think those are the highlights. I think, as I've said many times, this comes down to priorities. I don't agree with these priorities. I think there's plenty of money to fund the priorities that we need. We need to look at mandate relief seriously. We need to look at fund balance flexibility. In terms of mandate relief, there's many things that we can look at. We keep coming back to unemployment, the unemployment mandate. I keep coming back to it because it's the most obvious place of missed priorities that we have in our education budget. To Senator Farnsworth's point, you have people that took these jobs knowing what it is, 9-month jobs. And sure, like I've said many times, it would be great if we could just fund everything. And but when you're having to make priorities and you're cutting special education services, you're cutting teacher compensation, you're trying to put charter schools under, but yet we cling to this unemployment mandate. We're going to have to take a look at the mandate. I know that this one, it's $30 million because the goal is to just fund it for one more year, as opposed to another bill which was $100 million. But whether it's $30 million or $100 million, whether you fund it for one more year or 2 more years, then what? One bill has it, going to the property taxpayers. This one, I think, just makes it an unfunded mandate. At the conclusion of one more year, unemployment would just be another unfunded mandate to our schools. Ultimately, there's no way to avoid getting around the fact that we're going to have to look at the mandate itself. There's no other way if we want to fund our education priorities. If we can't agree on that mandate, then I don't know how we're going to proceed forward. So again, priorities, I think these are misplaced priorities. We need to fund the priorities. We shouldn't be cutting charter schools, teacher compensation, special education services. So I think this committee has a lot of work to do, and I look forward to being a part of it. Thanks.
Anyone else with any comments? Any final words from the department?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'll just say we appreciate the opportunity to be able to lay out the task ahead of the legislature and the executive branch to find a balanced budget. It is not a pleasant task given the deficit in front of us. I don't take the comments lightly. I think that, honest feedback around the displeasure with some of the proposals that are coming around where these are seemingly priorities. I would like to point the committee back to the great work done in 23 and 24 for funding priorities, many of which were mentioned here as items of concern. We did place a lot of funding in special education. We're going to climb up to 50% of the special education cross-subsidy. We jumped from 6.43% to 44% of the special education cross-subsidy. We have an incredible increase in funding for English learner, the English learner funding, and then the English learner cross-subsidy coming on. Funding for the general education formula that benefits traditional public school or districts as well as charter schools, that will increase automatically with inflation starting next year. There were significant resources put forward for schools in 23-24. We unfortunately, due to economic indicators, both world, federal, and state, have a tough task ahead of us. But I would encourage the members of the committee to not look at this budget here in front of us as all-encompassing of what the governor's priorities are. The governor's priorities are a makeup of many of the years, or all of the years going forward, including 23 and 24, which really are an accomplishment together bipartisanly of all of the efforts that we've had over the many years. And this budget is a response to the fiscal deficit in front of us. And so really appreciate the opportunity to lay this out in front of the committee for the decisions that we have in front of us, and just to know that this is a starting place for a conversation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Mr. Uni, and Ms. Erickson, for your expertise in this area. This is an extremely, extremely hard lesson right now for all of us. It's not something that any of us are relishing, any of us are salivating over. It's very heartbreaking in a lot of different ways, in a lot of different areas. We've worked really hard to get those resources and those dollars to our students, to our special ed students, to feed our students, to support our staff in the best way possible in the last couple of years. And this is, an extraordinary time that we find ourselves in. And it, as a former teacher, totally breaks my heart. It totally breaks my heart to have to reduce anything in education after we invested in such a incredible way in the last couple of years. But the reality is, we do have to cut the budget. We do have to make cuts. We do have to trim here, we have to trim there. And every entity of education, K-12, is going to have to, carry some of that burden. When we talk about adjusting, when we talk about capping, when we talk about moving things to ensure that we are not, over budget and that we're looking to the future. I think it's really important that we try to understand where this is all coming from and what we need to do. And the uncertainty from the federal government only adds to this. I mean, there's just no way we can go forward and fund education without making cuts. And it is extremely painful for everyone. And so we have a lot of work for ourselves here as we come to the close of the session and have to put together not just a 2-year budget, but look 4 years out and perhaps even more. But we are going to do the best that we can with what we have. And that's the bottom line. We have to do the best with what we have. And it's going to be painful in a lot of different areas for a lot of different entities. I have a feeling by the end of, putting together this budget, but that doesn't mean we're not looking to the future. It doesn't mean that we're not hopeful that down the road we'll be able to continue to do some of these reinvestments that we've been doing all along. And so I welcome to hear from our GOP members what kind of suggestions they have to meet our budget. But in the meantime, we'll take all of what has been said here today to heart and put together the best budget that we can to ensure that our public schools and that our students are receiving the best resources that they can. So thank you, MDE, for your presentation. We hope that we'll be able to really work out, something that's going to be palatable in one way or the other. So just closing announcement, members, tomorrow we're hearing 2 bills and testimony on Senate File 2255. Those that are signing up to testify, we are imposing a 2-minute limit, and we will stick to 2 minutes. So if you continue on after we give you the cutoff, we ask that you stop when we cut you off. Practice your speech tonight and make sure it's 2 minutes or under. And then there is not a hearing for Thursday. And so with that, this meeting is adjourned.